Emma Clark stood alone on a rain-soaked Bangkok street at 3 in the morning, staring at the neon-lit entrance of a police station she was too terrified to enter. Her hair clung to her face in wet strands. Her cotton dress, the one Jake had said made her eyes look like the ocean, stuck to her skin. She had no phone, no money. Her passport was tucked into her bra, the only thing she'd managed to hide before everything fell apart. The tuk-tuk driver who'd brought her here had long since disappeared into the Bangkok night, probably thinking she was just another drunk tourist who'd lost her way. If only it were that simple. If only she could explain to him, to anyone, how 3 months ago she thought she'd found paradise, and now she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt safe. The rain fell harder. Emma took one step toward the glass doors, then stopped. Inside, she could see a Thai police officer behind a desk, his head bent over paperwork. What would she even say? How would she begin to untangle the nightmare her life had become? She thought about her mother back in Sutton, who'd warned her not to go, who'd said Thailand was dangerous for women traveling alone. She thought about her best friend Sarah, who'd flown all the way from London to visit and had left after 4 days, disgusted by what she'd seen. Emma had called her paranoid. She'd chosen Jake over everyone. And now she stood outside a police station in a foreign country, realizing she had no one left to call. But to understand how Emma Clark ended up on that street, you have to go back. Back before Bangkok. Back before Jake. Back to the life she was so desperate to escape. 6 months earlier, Emma had been standing in front of Year 2 students at Croydon Primary, helping a small boy named Oliver sound out the word butterfly. The classroom smelled like poster paint and pencil shavings. Rain tapped against the windows. It was a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. The days had stopped feeling different years ago. She was 34 years old, a teaching assistant earning just enough to rent a 1-bedroom flat above a chicken shop on the high street. She'd been divorced for 2 years from a man named Martin who worked in accounting and had never once surprised her in 8 years of marriage. The divorce had been civil, almost boring, like everything else about their relationship. Martin kept the house in Bromley. Emma kept her books and a coffee maker he'd never used. Her life had settled into a rhythm so predictable it felt like drowning in slow motion. Monday through Friday, the same commute on the tram, dodging the same puddles on the walk from the station. Thursday evenings, shopping at Tesco, buying meals for one that she'd eat in front of Netflix. Sunday lunch at her mother's house in Sutton, where her younger sister Rachel would talk about her husband's promotion and her children's piano lessons while Emma nodded and smiled and felt invisible. Her mother would ask, in that careful way mothers do, if she was seeing anyone. Emma would say no, not yet, and change the subject. She'd scroll through Instagram late at night, lying in bed with the sound of drunk people shouting outside the chicken shop below. Former university friends posting photos from Bali, from Barcelona, from beaches she couldn't pronounce. Everyone seemed to be living these enormous, colorful lives, while hers had shrunk to the size of a classroom and a flat that smelled like fried chicken no matter how many candles she burned. It was February when she made the decision. Half-term was approaching, and the school secretary mentioned she was going to Tenerife with her husband. Emma had looked at her own calendar and seen nothing but blank spaces, no plans, no one to make plans with. That evening, she'd opened her laptop and searched her flights to somewhere far away, somewhere that felt like the opposite of Croydon. Thailand appeared in the results, and she clicked without thinking. 2 weeks in Bangkok. Departure in April. She entered her card details before she could talk herself out of it. Her mother had been horrified. Thailand? Alone? Emma, you read about these things. Women going missing. Scams. Diseases. Rachel had been more supportive in her own way. Good for you, she'd said over the phone, though Emma could hear the doubt underneath. Just be careful. Even Martin had sent a text when he'd heard through mutual friends. Bangkok? Really? Doesn't seem like you. Emma had stared at that message for a long time. Doesn't seem like you. Maybe that was exactly the point. The weeks before the trip were the first time Emma had felt anything close to excitement in years. She bought a new suitcase, read travel blogs, downloaded meditation apps for the plane. She told her Year 2 students she was going on an adventure, and they'd drawn her pictures of elephants and temples. One girl named Amelia had asked if she was scared. Emma had smiled and said no, but the truth was more complicated. She was terrified, but she was also desperate for her life to feel like something other than a slow fade into nothing. The flight was 13 hours. She didn't sleep. Bangkok hit her like a wall of heat and noise when she stepped out of the airport. The taxi ride to Khao San Road was a blur of highways and temples and traffic that moved like a living thing. Her guest house was small and clean, run by a Thai family who spoke broken English. The room had a hard mattress and a fan that rattled. Emma lay on the bed that first afternoon, jet-lagged and overwhelmed, and wondered what she'd done. But something shifted on the second day. She walked through the Grand Palace and felt the scale of it dwarf her small anxieties. She took a boat along the Chao Phraya River and watched Bangkok slide past in layers of gold and concrete. She ate pad thai from a street cart and burned her tongue and didn't care. A group of Australian backpackers invited her to join them for drinks, and she stayed out until midnight, laughing at stories she'd forget by morning. She went to temples and night markets and cooking classes. She smiled at strangers. Strangers smiled back. For the first time in years, Emma felt like she was someone interesting, someone worth knowing. By the fifth day, she'd found a rhythm. Early mornings at a cafe near her guest house, writing in a journal she'd bought at a market. Afternoons exploring different neighborhoods. Evenings wherever the day took her. That night, another traveler at the guest house, a German girl named Petra, mentioned a rooftop bar in Sukhumvit that had incredible views. Emma almost said no. She was tired, but something made her say yes. The bar was on the 32nd floor of a hotel she could never afford to stay in. Glass walls and low lighting and Bangkok stretching out in every direction, a sea of lights that seemed to go on forever. Emma ordered a gin and tonic and stood by the railing, feeling the warm wind on her face. She thought about Croydon, about the tram and the chicken shop and Sunday lunches. It felt like a different lifetime, like a costume she'd taken off and wasn't sure she'd ever put back on. First time in Bangkok? She turned. The man standing next to her was tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair that needed cutting and a sleeve of tattoos running down his left arm. He was holding a beer and smiling in a way that didn't feel like a pickup line. Just curious. Friendly. That obvious? Emma said. You've got that look. Like you can't believe any of this is real. His accent was Australian, she thought. Or maybe South African. I'm Jake. Emma. They shook hands. His grip was warm and firm. He asked where she was from, and when she said London, he laughed. Escaped the grey, did you? Can't blame you. I left Melbourne 7 years ago and never looked back. They talked. It was easy in a way conversation hadn't been easy in a long time. He told her he worked in import-export logistics, something vague about shipping and supply chains that she didn't fully understand but didn't need to. He'd lived in Bangkok for 5 years, he said. Before that, Vietnam. Before that, Singapore. I got tired of people telling me how to live, he said. Out here, you make your own rules. Emma told him about teaching, about the divorce, about booking the trip on impulse. She expected him to look bored or uncomfortable, but he just listened, really listened. When she mentioned Martin, Jake shook his head. 8 years and he never surprised you? Christ, what a waste. A waste of time? Emma asked. A waste of you. It was a line. She knew it was a line. But something about the way he said it, looking at her like she was someone worth wasting, made her chest feel tight. They talked for 2 hours, about travel and risk, and what it meant to really live instead of just existing. Jake had opinions about everything but didn't make her feel small for disagreeing. He asked questions about her childhood, her family, her fears. When she mentioned she was supposed to fly home in 9 days, he raised his eyebrows. 9 days? That's barely enough time to scratch the surface. I have a job, Emma said, though even as she said it, the idea of going back to year 2 and the tram and Thursday shopping felt impossible. You have a life, Jake said. Big difference. The bar was closing. Jake walked her to the street and hailed a taxi. Before she got in, he kissed her forehead, soft and brief, like a promise. I hope I see you again before you leave, he said. Emma lay awake that night in her guest house, listening to the sounds of Khao San Road through the thin walls, backpackers laughing, music thumping, motorcycles buzzing past. She thought about Jake's smile, the tattoos on his arms, the way he'd looked at her like she was already someone different than who she'd been in London. She picked up her phone and opened her email. The school's address was saved. She started typing, then stopped, then started again. 3 days later, she extended her stay by a week. A week after that, she sent an email to the school's headmaster. It was vague and apologetic. A family emergency, she'd need to take unpaid leave, possibly indefinitely. She let them know. She pressed send before she could second-guess it. Jake texted her that afternoon. Dinner tonight? I know a place. Emma stared at the message. She thought about her mother, about Rachel, about what they'd say if they knew. Then she thought about the year 2 classroom and the tram and the chicken shop. She thought about Martin saying, doesn't seem like you, like that was something to be proud of. She texted back. Yes, she didn't know it then, but that single word would cost her everything. Dinner that night was at a restaurant, Emma would never have found on her own. No tourists, no English menus. Just a narrow shophouse in Chinatown with plastic chairs and ceiling fans that barely moved the heavy air. Jake ordered in Thai, fluid and confident, laughing with the owner like they were old friends. The food came in waves. Spicy salads and grilled fish and soups that made Emma's eyes water. Jake watched her try everything, smiling when she winced at the heat, refilling her water glass without being asked. "You're braver than you think," he said. It was such a small thing to say, but Emma felt it settle somewhere deep. No one had ever called her brave before. After that night, they were inseparable. Jake seemed to know everyone in Bangkok. He took her to rooftop bars where the staff greeted him by name, to night markets where vendors gave him discounts, to restaurants hidden in alleys she'd have walked past 100 times. He paid for everything, waving off her protests with a smile. "Let me take care of you," he'd say. "You deserve this." Emma had spent so long taking care of herself, budgeting every meal, saying no to things she couldn't afford, that being taken care of felt like a drug. She stopped offering to split bills. She stopped checking prices. She let herself be carried along by Jake's world, and it felt like flying. 3 weeks into whatever they were, Jake suggested she move out of the guest house. "It's noisy. You're not sleeping well. I've got space." His condo was in Thonglor, a neighborhood Emma had read about but never visited. Modern towers, expensive cars, expats with money. The building had a pool on the roof and a gym on the 3rd floor. His unit was on the 18th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the chaos of Bangkok below. Sleek furniture, minimal. Everything white and chrome and glass. Emma stood in the living room that first evening and felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life, someone successful, someone important. "You like it?" Jake asked, coming up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "It's incredible," Emma said. And it was, but there was also something unsettling about the perfection of it, like it wasn't quite real. Like it was a set piece waiting for the scene to start. Jake kissed her neck. "It's ours now." Emma moved in the next day. She told herself it was practical. The guest house was paid through the end of the week anyway. Why waste money when Jake had all this space? She'd stay a few weeks, maybe a month, just until she figured out what came next. She didn't let herself think about the emails she'd sent to the school, or the fact that she'd stopped responding to her mother's increasingly worried calls. She was living. Finally, actually living. The rest could wait. The first month in the condo was a dream she kept trying not to wake from. Jake took her to Hua Hin for a weekend, a beach resort with a private villa and breakfast served on the balcony. They spent days doing nothing, just lying in the sun and swimming in the ocean and having sex that made Emma forget she'd ever been married to someone who scheduled intimacy like a dentist appointment. Jake talked about the future like it was already happening. A resort in Koh Samui they'd run together, winters in Bali, summers in Portugal. "We could do it," he'd say. "Just us. No rules, no one telling us how to live." Emma wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But there were moments, small things that didn't quite add up. Phone calls Jake would take in the other room, speaking rapid Thai, his voice tight and clipped. He'd come back smiling like nothing had happened, but Emma could feel the tension radiating off him. Once, she asked what the call was about. Jake's smile had flickered, just for a second. "Work stuff. Boring logistics. Nothing you need to worry about." The way he said it made it clear the conversation was over. His mood shifted like weather. Some days he was the Jake from the rooftop bar, charming and attentive, and making her feel like the center of the universe. Other days he was distant, distracted, staring at his phone with a jaw so tight Emma could see the muscle working. When she asked if everything was okay, he'd snap. "I'm fine. Why are you always asking if I'm fine?" Then, an hour later, he'd apologize. "Flowers. A gift. I'm sorry, baby. Work's been stressful. I shouldn't take it out on you." Emma would forgive him because the alternative was admitting something was wrong, and she wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. There was an office in the condo, a second bedroom Jake had converted into workspace. The door was always locked. Emma asked about it once, casual, and Jake had laughed. "Just files and boring paperwork. Trust me, you'd fall asleep in 5 minutes." But she'd seen him go in there late at night, heard his voice through the door, tense and urgent. Once she'd tried the handle while he was in the shower. Locked. She'd felt guilty immediately, like she'd violated some unspoken trust. She never tried again. Jake's friends came and went at odd hours. Men mostly. Thai and foreign. They'd sit in the living room speaking in low voices while Emma stayed in the bedroom, feeling like an intruder in a space that was supposed to be hers too. Jake never introduced her, never explained who they were or what they wanted. Business associates, he'd say if she asked. Nothing interesting. But the way they looked at her when she passed through to get water, assessing and cold, made her skin crawl. 2 months in, Jake asked her for a favor. They were lying in bed, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her shoulder. "I need you to help me with something," he said. "Nothing major. Just receiving some packages while I'm traveling." Emma had turned to look at him. "Packages?" "Legal documents. Import paperwork for clients. I'm out of the country a lot, and the building requires someone to sign for deliveries. It'd be a huge help." It sounded harmless. Emma had nodded. "Sure, of course." The first package arrived 3 days later. A padded envelope addressed to Jake, shipped from Malaysia. Emma signed for it, left it on the kitchen counter. Jake came home that evening, grabbed it without comment, disappeared into the locked office. She thought nothing of it. More packages came. Once a week, then twice. Different countries, Singapore, Vietnam, Hong Kong. Always the same padded envelopes or small boxes. Jake would thank her, kiss her forehead, take them into the office. Emma stopped paying attention. It was just mail, nothing strange about receiving mail. Then Jake asked about the bank account. They were having dinner at a Japanese restaurant in Phnom Penh, expensive steak and sushi that melted on the tongue. Jake reached across the table and took her hand. "I've been thinking about our future," he said. "The resort in Samui. We should start planning seriously." Emma's heart had jumped. "Really? Really? But I need to set up some accounts here. Thai business accounts. It's easier if you open one. Foreign ownership laws, you know how it is." Emma didn't know how it was. She knew nothing about Thai business law. But Jake was looking at her with those eyes, the ones that made her feel chosen, and she wanted to be the kind of person who said yes to things, the kind of person who took risks. "Okay," she said. "What do I need to do?" Jake had smiled. "I'll take care of everything. Just need your passport and signature." She'd opened the account the following week at a Bangkok bank branch in Siloam. Jake came with her, translated everything, guided her through the forms. The account was in her name. She didn't think about why. Didn't ask. She signed where he told her to sign. A week later, Jake made the first deposit, 200,000 baht. Emma had stared at her phone when the notification came through. "Jake, that's too much. I can't. It's our money," he'd said. "For the resort. For us. I trust you." The way he said trust made her feel like questioning it would be a betrayal. So she didn't. More deposits came, larger amounts, money moving in, money moving out, transfers she didn't understand to accounts she didn't recognize. Jake handled it all. "Just business," he'd say when she looked at the statements with confusion. "Don't worry about it." Emma wanted to not worry about it. Worrying meant admitting she was in over her head. Worrying meant acknowledging that she'd let a man she'd known for 3 months have access to a bank account in her name in a foreign country. Worrying meant the dream was cracking. Her mother called one Thursday evening while Jake was out. Emma almost didn't answer, but guilt made her pick up. "Emma, finally. I've been trying to reach you for weeks." Her mother's voice was tight with worry and anger. "What's going on? The school said you resigned, without even discussing it with us." Emma had stepped out onto the balcony, Bangkok's traffic humming 18 floors below. "I needed a change, Mum. A change. You had a good job. A stable life. Now you're in Thailand with some man we've never met doing God knows what. His name is Jake, and I'm happy." "Are you?" Her mother's voice had softened. "Because you don't sound happy, love. You sound scared." Emma had hung up. She told herself it was because her mother didn't understand, because her mother had never taken a risk in her life. But lying in bed that night, Jake's arm heavy across her waist, she'd replayed the conversation. "You sound scared." Was she scared? Or was this just what it felt like to finally live without a safety net? Sarah came to visit in month 3. Emma's best friend since university, the one person who'd always told her the truth, even when it hurt. She flew into Bangkok on a Friday, and Emma met her at the airport with forced brightness. They hugged. Sarah pulled back, looking at Emma's face like she was searching for someone. "You look different," Sarah said. "Good different?" Emma asked. Sarah didn't answer right away. "Different." The weekend was a disaster from the start. Jake was charming at first, shaking Sarah's hand, offering to take them both to dinner. But Sarah saw through it immediately. Emma could tell by the way her friend's smile didn't reach her eyes. At dinner, Jake dominated the conversation, talking over Emma when she tried to speak, ordering for her without asking. Sarah's jaw got tighter with every passing minute. Back at the condo, Sarah waited until Jake went to bed before cornering Emma in the kitchen. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "What do you mean?" "This, him. Emma, he won't even let you finish a sentence. He treats you like you're his property." Emma felt her chest tighten with defensive anger. "You don't know him. You've spent one evening with him. I know enough. I know you've quit your job for a man you barely know. I know you're living in his flat, isolated from everyone who cares about you. I know you look terrified." "I'm not terrified. I'm happy." "Then why haven't you posted anything online in 2 months? Why aren't you answering your mom's calls?" "Because I'm living my life instead of performing it for other people." Sarah had stared at her. "He told you to say that, didn't he?" The words hit like a slap. Emma wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Because Sarah was right, Jake had suggested she delete her social media. Too much negativity, he'd said. Live in the moment, and she'd done it without question. Sarah left 2 days early. They barely spoke before she got in the taxi to the airport. "When you're ready to come home," Sarah had said, "call me, I'll be there." Emma had watched the taxi disappear and felt a door close somewhere inside her. Jake had been furious when he found out Sarah had left early. "What did she say to you?" "Nothing. She just had to get back. She doesn't like me." "Jake, she's jealous. That's what it is. You've got something good here, and she can't stand it." He'd pulled Emma close, his grip tight on her arms. "You know I only want what's best for you, right? People like her, they don't understand. They want you to be small and safe and miserable like them." Emma had nodded against his chest. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. Because if Sarah was right, then everything Emma had given up, everything she'd walked away from, had been for nothing. The trip started after that. Jake would disappear for days at a time. Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Ho Chi Minh City. Business, he'd say, and Emma stopped asking for details. While he was gone, she'd wander the condo like a ghost, ordering food delivery, watching Netflix, trying not to think about the bank statements she'd stopped looking at or the packages that kept arriving, or the locked office she'd never been inside. When Jake called, his voice would be warm and loving. "Miss you, baby. Can't wait to get home." But when he did come home, he was different, paranoid, checking her phone while she was in the shower, asking who she'd talked to, where she'd been. "It's dangerous out there for foreign women alone," he'd say. "I just want to keep you safe." Safe. Emma started to realize safe meant controlled. Safe meant the condo. Safe meant Jake's rules. Safe meant asking permission to go to the store. She'd become a prisoner without walls. And the worst part was, she 500 built the cage herself. One night, Jake came home at 3 in the morning. Emma woke to the sound of the door slamming. She found him in the living room, pacing, his phone pressed to his ear, shouting in Thai. When he saw her, he ended the call. "Go back to bed." "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Go back to bed." But she'd seen his face, the fear in his eyes, the sweat on his forehead. Something was very wrong. And whatever it was, Emma was trapped inside it with him. The breaking point came on a Thursday night, though Emma had long since stopped keeping track of days. Jake had left that morning for what he said was a quick trip to Pattaya, business meeting, back by evening. He'd kissed her goodbye, told her to stay inside, locked the door. "I'll bring dinner," he'd said. That was at 9 in the morning. By midnight, he still wasn't home. His phone went straight to voicemail. Emma sat on the couch in the dark condo, the city lights blinking through the windows, and felt the fear she'd been pushing down for months finally surface. Something was wrong. Something had always been wrong. She'd just been too desperate or too stupid or too in love to see it. At 2 in the morning, Emma stood up. She walked to the locked office door. Her hand touched the handle, testing it like she'd done a dozen times before. Locked, always locked. She thought about the packages, the bank account, the midnight phone calls, Jake's friends with their cold eyes, the way he'd isolated her piece by piece until she had nothing left but him. She thought about Sarah's face before she left. "You look terrified." Emma went to the kitchen and opened the drawer where Jake kept miscellaneous items, batteries, rubber bands, a screwdriver, and there, underneath a tangle of phone chargers, a small key she'd noticed before but never questioned. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She told herself she was just checking, just putting her paranoid mind at ease. She'd look inside, see boring paperwork like Jake had said, feel foolish, and put everything back. The key fit. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The office was small and windowless. A desk, a laptop, filing cabinets. The first thing Emma saw were the passports laid out on the desk. Not one, not two. 5 passports. She picked up the first one with trembling fingers. British. The photo was Jake, but the name read James Pritchard. The second was Australian, different name. The third Canadian. All with Jake's face, all with different identities. Her stomach lurched. She set them down carefully, like they might explode. The filing cabinet was unlocked. Inside were stacks of cash, tie-bought and rubber-banded bundles, US dollars, euros, more money than Emma had ever seen in one place. Underneath the cash were hard drives, labeled with dates and codes she didn't understand. She pulled out a folder. Inside were printed documents, some in Thai, some in English. She couldn't make sense of most of it, but certain words jumped out. Shipment, delivery, methamphetamine, precursor chemicals, distribution networks. Her vision blurred. She sat down hard on the office chair. On the desk was a stack of papers clipped together. Bank statements. She recognized the account number, her account, the one she'd opened because Jake said they needed it for the resort. Millions of baht had moved through it, in and out. Transfers to accounts in Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong. She thought about the packages she'd signed for, the innocent-looking envelopes. She'd been receiving drugs, or money, or evidence, and signing her name to all of it. Emma's hands moved on autopilot. She pulled out her phone, the one Jake didn't know she kept hidden in her drawer after he'd taken her main 1 week ago. Dead battery. She found a charger in Jake's desk drawer, plugged it in, waited for it to power on. While it charged, she photographed everything. The passports, the money, the documents, the bank statements. Her hands shook so badly some of the photos came out blurred, but she kept going. Evidence. She needed evidence. She didn't know what she was going to do with it, but she knew she needed it. The phone finally had enough charge to turn on. No service. Jake had canceled her SIM card months ago, saying it was cheaper to use his. But the camera worked. She took dozens of photos. When she was done, she carefully put everything back the way she'd found it. The passports in a line, the files in order, the cash stacked neatly. She backed out of the office, locked the door, returned the key to the kitchen drawer. Then she sat on the couch and waited. Jake came home at dawn. Emma heard his key in the lock and felt her whole body go rigid. He walked in looking exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He saw her on the couch and stopped. For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then his eyes moved to the office door, back to her face. He knew, somehow he knew. "You went inside," he said, not a question, a statement. Emma's mouth was too dry to speak. She nodded. Jake closed the front door behind him very carefully, locked it, put the keys in his pocket. When he looked at her again, the man she'd met on the rooftop bar was completely gone. What was left was something cold and calculating. A stranger wearing Jake's face. "He shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "Who are you?" Emma's voice came out as a whisper. "Does it matter? The passports, the money, my bank account." She was shaking now, couldn't stop. "What have you done?" Jake walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, drank it slowly. When he turned back to her, his expression was almost bored. "You really want to know? Fine. I move product. Synthetic drugs mostly. Precursors from China, manufactured in Myanmar, distributed through Thailand to Australia and New Zealand. Very profitable, very illegal. And your account has been extremely useful for washing the money." Emma felt like she was going to be sick. "I didn't know. I didn't." "Of course you didn't know. That was the point." He set the glass down. "You were perfect, actually. Sweet, naive, desperate for adventure, desperate to be loved, so easy to manipulate." The words hit like physical blows. Emma stood up on shaking legs. "I'm leaving." Jake laughed. It was a terrible sound. "No, you're not. You can't keep me here." "Emma." He said her name like she was a child who didn't understand basic facts. "Your name is on everything. The account, the rental agreements for the storage units, the delivery confirmations. You've been signing for packages containing methamphetamine for 2 months. You think you can just walk into a police station and play victim? You're complicit. You go to the police, you go to prison. Thai prison. Do you know what that's like for foreign women?" Emma's legs gave out. She sat back down hard. "I didn't know," she said again, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. "Doesn't matter. Ignorance isn't a defense. Not here." Jake pulled out his phone, showed her photos. Her signing for packages. Her at the bank. Surveillance footage from the building. "I have everything I need to make sure you go down with me if this goes wrong, which it won't, but insurance is important. What are you going to do with me?" The question came out small and terrified. Jake looked at her like he was doing calculations. "I need to figure that out. In the meantime, you stay here. No phone, no leaving. No talking to anyone." He held out his hand. "Give me the phone." Emma thought about the photos on the hidden phone, still charging in the bedroom. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a different phone, an old one she'd stopped using. Handed it over. Jake took it without checking, slipped it into his pocket. "Smart girl," he said. "I'll be back tomorrow. Behave yourself." He left. She heard the door lock from the outside, the deadbolt. She was a prisoner. For 2 days, Emma lived in a nightmare. Jake came and went, bringing food, watching her with eyes that held no warmth. He was making phone calls constantly, arguing in Thai, his stress levels visibly rising. Something was going wrong with his operation. Emma could feel it. And she was the loose end. On the 3rd day, Jake made a mistake. He left in a hurry, angry, distracted by whatever crisis he was managing. He locked the door, but forgot she'd hidden a spare key months ago, buried in a plant pot on the balcony, just in case she ever locked herself out. Emma waited an hour after he left, then another. Then she moved. The spare key was still there. She grabbed it, grabbed her passport from the hiding spot in her underwear drawer, grabbed the phone with the photos. No time for anything else, no time to think. She unlocked the door, slipped out, took the stairs instead of the elevator, 18 floors down, her legs burning, her heart threatening to explode. The lobby was empty except for a security guard who barely looked up from his phone. Emma stepped out into Bangkok's heat and noise and had no idea where to go. She had no money, no Thai language, no plan beyond get out. A tuk-tuk driver saw her standing there, clearly in distress, and asked something in Thai. Emma just said police station, and he'd nodded, gestured for her to get in. That's how she ended up on a rain-soaked street at 3 in the morning. The driver had brought her here and left. And Emma had stood outside, paralyzed by shame and fear and the terrible knowledge that going inside meant admitting everything. The fantasy, the stupidity, the way she'd thrown away her entire life for a man who'd never been real. But she went inside, because the alternative was going back. The Thai police officer didn't speak much English. He called someone. A translator arrived, then a detective. Emma tried to explain, but it came out in broken pieces. The condo, the passports, the money, Jake, James, whoever he was. She showed them the photos on her phone with shaking hands. The detective's expression changed. He made calls. More people arrived. A woman from the British embassy, severe and efficient, asking questions Emma didn't know how to answer. How long had she known? What exactly had she done? Why hadn't she come forward sooner? Emma cried through most of it. Great, heaving sobs that made her whole body shake. She'd been so stupid, so incredibly, catastrophically stupid. The investigation moved faster than Emma expected. Thai police raided the condo. Jake was gone. The office was empty, cleaned out, like it had never existed. But Emma's photos were enough. They traced the accounts, the shipments, the network. James Pritchard was his real name. British national, wanted in 3 countries. Fraud, drug trafficking, extortion. He'd done this before. Other women, other countries. Emma was just the latest in a long line of people he'd used and discarded, but that didn't absolve her. Thai authorities detained Emma for questioning. Days stretched into weeks. She was allowed to stay in a small hotel near the embassy, but she couldn't leave the country. A lawyer the embassy provided explained her situation in careful terms. She'd unknowingly facilitated money laundering. The prosecution might show leniency if she cooperated. Might. There were no guarantees. Emma's face appeared in Thai newspapers. British woman linked to drug ring. Her mother called, crying so hard she couldn't speak. Rachel called and screamed at her. How could you be so stupid? How could you not see? Emma had no answers. Sarah called and just said, "Come home. Please come home." But Emma couldn't. Not yet. The investigation dragged on. Emma gave statements, answered the same questions dozens of times, lived in a strange limbo between victim and accomplice. The consular officer, a woman named Margaret, was the only one who showed her any kindness. "These men are very good at what they do," she said one afternoon. "They target women who are vulnerable. You're not the first. You won't be the last." After 6 weeks, the charges against Emma were dropped. The evidence showed she'd been manipulated. The prosecutor agreed she was more useful as a witness than a defendant, but the damage was done. Emma's savings were gone, seized as evidence or spent by Jake before he disappeared. Her bank account was frozen. Her reputation was destroyed. Thai immigration gave her 72 hours to leave the country. Emma flew back to London on a Tuesday in August. Her mother met her at Heathrow, and they cried in the arrivals hall while travelers streamed past them. Emma moved back into her childhood bedroom in Sutton, the room where she'd grown up, with faded posters on the walls and a single bed too small for her adult body. She couldn't look at her mother without feeling crushing shame, couldn't face Rachel, couldn't return Sarah's calls. The job at the school was gone. They'd hired someone else. Emma's CB now had a 6-month gap she couldn't explain without telling the truth, and the truth made her unemployable. She went to therapy twice a week with a counselor who specialized in manipulation and abuse. The counselor used terms like trauma bonding and coercive control. Emma nodded and cried and couldn't reconcile the clinical language with the feeling of Jake's arms around her, the way he'd made her feel special. Months passed. Emma got a job at a supermarket, stocking shelves on the night shift. It was mindless work, which helped. She didn't have to think, didn't have to explain. Her coworkers didn't know where she'd been or what had happened. She was just Emma, quiet and damaged, who showed up on time and kept to herself. She checked the news compulsively for information about Jake James, whoever he was, but there was nothing. He'd vanished like smoke, probably in another city by now, another country, with another woman who thought she'd finally found someone who understood her. Emma thought about trying to warn people somehow, posting his photo online, but the consular officer had advised against it. He has resources. Connections. You don't want him coming back into your life. So Emma said nothing and lived with the knowledge that he was still out there, still hunting. She still checked over her shoulder, still jumped at unexpected sounds, still had nightmares where she was back in the condo, locked in, screaming for help that never came. Her therapist said it would get better, said healing wasn't linear, said Emma needed to forgive herself. But how do you forgive yourself for being the architect of your own destruction? What Emma had learned, at a cost she'd spent years calculating, was how easy it is to lose yourself when someone offers you a version of life that feels bigger than the one you have. She'd been so desperate to escape the gray monotony of Croydon that she'd walked straight into a nightmare dressed up as a dream. Jake had seen that desperation the moment he met her, had known exactly what she needed to hear. You deserve this. You're special. Let me take care of you. And she'd believed him because she'd wanted so badly for it to be true. She thought about all the red flags she'd ignored, the locked office, the mysterious friends, the mood swings, the isolation. Each one had been a neon sign screaming danger, and she'd looked away every single time because acknowledging them meant admitting she'd made a terrible mistake. And admitting that meant going back to being nobody in a small flat above a chicken shop. So she'd stayed. She'd chosen the beautiful lie over the ugly truth until the choice was taken away from her. On a cold November evening, almost a year after she'd left Bangkok, Emma walked home from her shift at the supermarket. It was raining. London rain, steady and gray. She passed her old school, saw lights on in the classrooms. Somewhere inside, a teaching assistant was helping a child sound out words. Someone else was living the life Emma had thrown away. She stopped walking and just stood there, letting the rain soak through her coat. Bangkok had taught her something brutal and necessary. That freedom isn't found in running away. That romance isn't salvation. That the person promising you the world is often the one taking everything you have. She'd traveled halfway across the globe looking for a life that felt meaningful and had lost herself so completely it had taken months to even begin putting the pieces back together. She never went back to Thailand. The thought of it made her physically ill. But in a terrible way, Bangkok had never left her. It lived in her hypervigilance, her inability to trust, her certainty that happiness was just a trap waiting to spring. The therapist said this was trauma. Emma called it education. An expensive, devastating education in the fragility of the self and the price of believing that someone else can save you from your own life. Jake, or James, or whatever his real name was never caught. Emma learned to live with that. Learned to live with the fact that he'd moved on while she was still picking up pieces, that he'd probably forgotten her name while she'd built her entire existence around ensuring she never forgot his. That was the final injustice. She'd lost everything. He'd lost nothing. The world wasn't fair. Love wasn't real. Or if it was, she'd never actually experienced it. What she'd had in Bangkok was a performance, a con, a masterclass in manipulation delivered by someone who'd done it so many times he perfected every gesture. On particularly bad nights, Emma still wondered what would have happened if she'd never broken into that office. If she'd stayed ignorant. If she'd let Jake keep her locked in his perfect glass cage in Thonglor. The thought made her sick, but it also made her grateful. Grateful that she'd looked. Grateful that she'd escaped. Grateful that she'd survived. She was 35 years old, living with her mother, working a minimum wage job, and trying to remember who she'd been before Bangkok. That person felt like a stranger now. Emma Clark, teaching assistant who'd booked a holiday on impulse and lost herself in the process. She didn't know if she'd ever get that person back. She wasn't sure she wanted to. That person had been naive enough to believe a stranger's promises, desperate enough to abandon everything for a fantasy. What remained was harder and colder and infinitely more careful. Emma didn't date, didn't travel, didn't take risks. She went to work, went to therapy, went home. It was a small life, a safe life, the kind of life she'd once fled from. But at least it was real. At least it was hers. And in the end, after everything, that had to be enough.